Hello everyone and welcome to the Online Hustle Podcast. Today we're joined by a very special guest, Mark Houghton from KATA Global Logistics, who will take us on a journey through the world of shipping operations. Get ready to uncover winning strategies for optimizing your logistics. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Online Hustle Podcast. Today I'm joined by Mark Houghton from KATA Global Logistics. Mark, how are you?
I'm very well, Piero, and looking forward to this, and thanks for the invitation.
Hey, thank you so much. And look, we go straight ahead. And the main reason why we wanted you on this podcast is, first of all, obviously about your knowledge through the overall logistics field globally. But I think from a seller's perspective and a business perspective, there is a huge misconception on understanding what is actually the whole process of delivering their order product all the way to the final door of the customer, right? So let's say I'm a business that's actually gone and source product either from China, US, or anywhere in the world. There is a whole process where I expect the manufacturer to package the product, put it in a box or pallet or a container and be sent to our warehousing solution or Amazon or anyone that can actually hold the product and then be sold accordingly or be sent accordingly to any other business. I know for a fact that you know the step-by-step process, and I know for a fact it isn't easy as I made it sound. So could you please just kind of go through the major steps that are part of that journey and maybe make it a little bit simpler for me as well, if you can?
No, absolutely, Piero. As you say, it is a complex, process actually, but let's try and break it down and keep it simple. So 7 steps for international shipping. Let's focus on the international side because you mentioned, US and China. So, to start with, you've got to do the export haulage. That all comes from the origin of handling. You then need to do the export clearances. That means it's left its destination of export. Then you need to choose the right freight method. So obviously there's different types of freight method you can use, and I'm sure we'll touch on that very shortly. From this, you need to do the import clearance on arrival. You need to do the destination handling. You need to do the import haulage, which is the final mile. It sounds very easy, but there's so many processes involved in delivering the end-to-end solution. What I advise is, here at KATA, we can guide you through that journey, and we can make each process very simplified for you. And we can give you many options.
Amazing. Perfect. Exactly what I wanted to hear. But I think from having sourced product, let's say from Alibaba in China, I think there's so many facilitators. And as I said, I have these certain expectations. Once I've done the product development and I've paid and I've ordered the units that I want to order, I expect everything done for me. But I know for a fact there are different ways. For example, when I've sampled products, those sample products tend to arrive to me in a matter of days, right? They will create the product, they'll send it to me, and it will arrive very quickly. But I know it will be a company like FedEx, DHL that tend to be in charge of these because the mail's coming via air. Now, when I put the big order in, obviously, I can't imagine it going on a plane unless you know something that I don't know. And they tend to be either put in a pallet, from a pallet into a ship, and obviously shipped over to the final destination. What are the different types of freight there are there? Because from having worked in rail freight myself, I've seen it. I've seen containers be on trains as well. So how does that relate to the overall picture of that journey?
No, good questions. I mean, there's 4 types of freight options. You're looking at air, sea, road, and rail. And you mentioned rail there as well, and you're rightly so. It's becoming quite popular. But let's start with the common one, which is sea. Everyone knows sea freight because you see the containers arriving in the ports. So with regards to sea freight, you have 2 options. You have FCL, which is your full container load, and you have LCL, which is your less container load. So if your clients are not numerous enough to fill a container, then it's best to mix your freight with several clients. Okay. However, you have to be mindful that if you go with the FCL option, it's a cheaper option per unit, and it's exclusively for a single shipment and bears the cost for the entire container. So there's pros and cons on both, but those are the 2 options on sea freight. Now, air freight, you're right, correct, it's fast. And there's a reason, because it can reach its destination in only a day or 2. But you have to be mindful it's all expensive. It's very expensive in some places, especially with the fuel surcharges happening at the moment. So you need to be mindful of this. If you have goods which do need to arrive at its destination super fast and get into, say, FBA or into a 3PL warehouse, then air freight is the faster option. Now, you mentioned rail freight. Rail freight is very sustainable compared with trucks. It can also have, more cargo capacity. It's efficient, most punctual and ideal for an intermodal with road freight, because road freight still has to, deliver the final mile from the rail freight itself. Now, road freight is good for short distances and transit times. It offers the convenience of a door-to-door service, so it works very well alongside rail freight. But there are many options. So if you're shipping on road, let's say, for instance, UK to EU or EU to UK, then it makes sense to go via road freight and maximize your road freight, either FTL or LTL, which is full truckload or less truckload. It's very similar to the sea freight options.
Yeah, I mean, amazing. So before we touch up on the sustainability part, I've heard this rumor so many times where you could actually, being a more sustainable option, as you say, you could technically send a container or any of your products all the way from China to Europe through rail freight and road freight only. So you wouldn't have to do the whole waiting around through the road freight. You don't have to get it by air. Is that actually a misconception, or is it true?
No, it's true. It's true. Sea freight regularly takes 5 to 6 weeks, depending on where you're exporting from. Rail freight can actually take up to 3 weeks. It has to go through its journey through Europe if you're going into Europe or into the UK. So this is where road freight attaches itself to the rail freight. So the rail freight will get to its near enough final destination. It will then offload, and then it will then go via truck onto its final mile delivery. So they do work alongside rather well. But yes, it's true. There is a lot of possibilities with rail freight currently.
Yeah, and I'm guessing because of obviously the nature of Asian manufacturing, obviously products coming from China and Malaysia and Indonesia, all these countries. Mm-hmm. If rail freight were to be used from China, I guess that's why there's a strong warehousing developments over the Eastern European area. Obviously, there is a whole war going on that maybe doesn't really help right now. But I know warehousing in the Eastern European countries such as Poland and Czech Republic, I have warehousing solutions that have been really, really popular. And in terms of the cost compared to the other countries in Europe, tend to be are more competitive as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing that helps in some sort of way, where actually having that rail freight, having it being actually closer to China kind of helps.
Absolutely. And you're correct to, rightly saying there, in the Baltic side, the warehousing is relatively cheaper to, say, Central Europe because of the economics and the landscape of where they're based. With Central Europe, the main destinations are Germany, France, and the Netherlands, as we know, because they're classified as the gateway into Europe, especially the Netherlands through the Rotterdam port. Yeah. Because you have that, you have that customs LFR, which is the limited fiscal representation, where you can defer your duty and your VAT. So that gives you good options as a customer to, you could use sea freight into Rotterdam, and then there is another place where you could use air freight into Schiphol. So, Germany and the Netherlands are the two main central places, but Baltics is becoming quite a popular area, especially around Poland at the moment.
Amazing. Yeah. I've heard so many good things about Rotterdam being one of the best ports in the world on the way they clear, the facility and the velocity of their clearance side of things. But what I wanted to go into, now that you've already touched up on the side of things, is the carbon footprint side of things for business. And it's something that I've touched up on other webinars and other chats with other experts, especially on green alternatives. And all of a sudden, the ability to think about your carbon footprint and knowing your carbon footprint, at the same time thinking about the environmental impact of your products, have become almost not just as important as it is for obviously the world and our increasing environmental issues, but it's actually become a very important brand imaging point for many businesses, where it's very important for the customer, to the final buyer, the impact of what they are buying is. And even in overall in the episodes of this podcast, we have some amazing guests coming on and talking about their brands and how their sustainability has changed and given them a position in the market. However, why do you think, and how can businesses really think about their carbon footprint, knowing their carbon footprint, and somehow reduce it?
It's a very good question. I mean, sustainability is vital for any business, especially at the moment. That it's a very hot topic. I mean, we have this extended producer responsibility for packaging, which is a key topic for companies at the moment. And I would advise for companies to pay attention and apply this method to their product cycle, because it's vital. That also extends to the point of shipping. It's vital that you take that responsibility so you can recycle the product at its end life. And it makes sense to do that. For the final mile delivery is also a big part in the carbon footprint. There are many final mile delivery couriers, companies, hauliers will offer you the electric vehicle solution. So you can offset your carbon footprint if you don't directly own, the last mile delivery yourself. So I would say significantly, it is vital for businesses to understand to lower their carbon emission. It also makes them attractive for future investment in business. So from my point of view, especially with KATA Global Logistics, we try to partner with people where we can offset our carbon and try to promote that as much as possible with the final mile delivery.
Yeah, and I think it's a thing about performance as well, right? So with the electric side of things, there's a velocity of the product, actually facility to get around city centers as well, because I think it's in the future. And I'm going to ask at the very end of the podcast, I'm going to ask you about what the future of the industry looks. But I think with the way, not just European cities, but the whole Kyoto Agreement and other countries and very important tourist cities as well, I think there's going to be a point where electric vehicles are banned. Not electric vehicles, just like engine vehicles, when diesel engines will be banned, as they will be banned in the UK, for example, and city centres especially, where there is a lot of citizens actually live in, but they're trying to move into more pedestrian areas, for example, where those electric vehicles, these environmentally more conscious vehicles that actually can do that final delivery will help. And I think that's going to be a massive decider over the future and on that final delivery and that door-to-door, especially delivery.
Absolutely. It takes also a huge amount of investment from, let's say, for the couriers and all the carriers who are doing a final mile delivery to invest in that belief. They have to obviously hit a target. It's in their interest to do that, to be sustainability as a business. And it also offers them, the benefits of future opportunities is big, because a lot of, customers, sellers worldwide are looking for their parcels to be sustainable.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to operate with an operator who provides that service, because if a seller or a customer needs to offset, they can utilize that as their carbon footprint, which will then only benefit and attract future opportunities, to grow your business rapidly. So, but it takes a big investment. Don't get me wrong. It's a big investment from the final mile delivery guys. But it makes sense to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen it in brands, right? Such brands like Patagonia who have become really popular for how, their owners, as well as giving up all these shares. They're very environmentally conscious brand that actually, produces products out of recycled products. So in a whole carbon footprint, let's say of the whole journey, let's say from wherever you're sourcing your products, there is the raw materials to make your products might not be able to come all from one place. They have multiple components, right? So the whole carbon footprint journey starts from there, goes to the manufacturer, the final manufacturer that actually finalized the product. Then it's delivery from that manufacturer all the way to the warehousing solution, wherever that may be. And if you have multiple warehouses, as I would normally recommend to a client that's, set up in different continents. For example, the UK is now different to the EU. The US is a whole different market. Australia is so far away, but an emerging market. The UAE is completely, and the Emirates itself are a completely different market as well. So if you have all these different positions, even in China, all of a sudden tracking that carbon footprint becomes quite difficult. However, is understanding from starting point all the way to end point where you can really, really help and trying to reduce that final mileage as much as possible, right? But I appreciate with everything that you've said so far about the carbon footprint. And I think in terms of reducing what you can do and understanding your business and what you've been doing so far is the key part of actually being able to change that to the most possible way possible. Now, from my experience, there is one part of shipping that is very not complicated, because I know more or less what it is. However, it's the what I'm talking about is Incoterms, right? And Incoterms are very interesting because they change the way all the responsibilities that either the manufacturer or the buyer or the business has. Now, when I used to work in shipping, I mainly dealt with CIF, which stands for Cost Insurance Freight, if I'm not wrong, Mark, right? So it was quite good because all we had to do is basically produce everything, get the product from A to B. As soon as the product got to B, it just wasn't our responsibility anymore. Now, I know that's just one of the 11 or 12 Incoterms. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, no, you're correct. I think we could spend an hour on this topic.
Yeah.
Let's not. There are 11 internationally recognized, rules which define the responsibility of sellers and buyers. So the Incoterms specify who is responsible for paying, managing the shipment, insurance, as you mentioned, documentation, custom clearance, and other logistical activities. So, as I say to you, there's many different solutions a buyer or seller can select. But all our advisors at this stage, if they're really unsure of how to select the correct Incoterms, reach out to KATA, reach out to us. We can explore the opportunity and guide you, because if you do get it wrong, it will cost you. It could delay your shipment. It could get rejected at customs. So, all I'm going to say at this stage is, because if we go into too deep, it's very complex. I would just say, just reach out to us and we can guide you on that journey, because it's important from that part that you get that correct on an international level.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think there is a particular famous word that is a nightmare for any business out there, and it is the word demurrage, right? So demurrage cost is what a business, it's basically a fine, it's fines, right? It's fine for a business for not having done their checks, for not having done the relevant requirements that you have, and that's the cost that you have to pay for your products to be stuck in one place and not be released. How do you think, what is the best possible practice? I know KATA can do this, but what is the best possible practice to know that you are 100% going to avoid your demurrage charges when the product gets to the final port, not the final destination?
It's the final, it's that port demurrage. So I would say you have to go to a freight forwarder, and that's what KATA do. So we need to guide the seller and the buyer on that journey. For, literally, as we mentioned earlier, from the steps of collection, from export to import, all the way through the process. The process, like you say, is very complex, but it sounds easy on paper, but it's not. So what we try and do is advise, the seller and the buyer on their journey to ensure that they don't have any demurrage fees, because it's not in our interest also for the container to be stuck at port, because we have to then arrange the transport again, and the final mile delivery, it has an effect on the customer getting their goods into the warehouse. So it causes delays, and the fine, unfortunately, has to go back through the freight forwarder, back to the seller or the buyer, or or the customer. So there's a lot of complex things you need to be careful of. But if you follow the guidelines and you take advice, and we ensure that the product can be exported and imported at the correct method, and then there should be no reason why demurrage should happen.
Now, from the Incoterms knowledge that you just shared, what I wanted to understand is, I think a unique selling point for KATA is the knowledge that you have at that final port of destination, because it's well endowed. It's very easy for a business sense and a business efficiency sense, to pick the cheapest possible provider of the freight until that final point of destination. So I know from sourcing products from China, a lot of these inland manufacturers, they will have their own connections and their own freight forwarders, and they'll give you a very good price to send the product all the way to the final destination. However, I know for a fact that one of KATA's unique selling points is the expertise at the very end, when you think the product has arrived, and to again avoid those demurrage charges that we've just spoken about, I know that you can help in that sense. What are the tips and tricks to kind of, okay, I understand that I picked this shipping option. but I know it's cheap, but it's not necessarily the best for my business.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good question, and there is in this industry there is a case of where you could pick the cheap option. However, I would just advise to be careful. Just ask the right questions more, dive into it more. One of our USPs is to be transparent with all the costs. So we provide the cost broken down line by line. So there's no hidden costs at arrival. That's some of the experience we're gaining from sellers and customers who have moved away from various freight forwarders and are working with KATA, because we provide that breakdown. And our business model is focused on being one point of contact all the way through the journey, which is quite a USP for us. So we have the flexibility with the freight forwarding because we've got two customs divisions which sit alongside KATA Global Logistics, one in the UK and obviously one in the Netherlands, which is vital for the gateway into Europe. So to have that traceability of your goods and also link that to the customs system is vital, because we can track it all the way through, right through down to the final mile delivery. So it's not going through, say, a normal freight forwarder who just manages the freight forwarding side, and when it reaches customs, it's over to them. What we like to do is to continue that journey, and it's all under KATA, which is the transparency and the flexibility we can give to any seller and to any customer who wishes to onboard with us.
Amazing. No, I completely agree. And I think the main misconception on picking that cheaper option is the fact that each country that you're shipping to has completely different laws, right? Even on an import basis, the US is completely different to the UK. And since the magic word and the magic of Brexit has happened, lots has changed. Luckily, we now have the expertise and we have the knowledge of what is needed in terms of indirect representation that is needed to, you need someone to be jointly liable of the goods going across to Europe and the UK. But, it's a very common misconception to go and say to your shipper, okay, I just need it delivered. I think with the word shipping comes a lot of, as we've already mentioned, with that journey being so complicated, it's not as straightforward as getting a container from A to B. There's so much in between. And
absolutely.
And from experience as well, I worked in the car industry, for example, the requirements are completely different from what is required for it to ship. So, for example, obviously being Sri Lanka myself, shipping into Sri Lanka was very different because actually there's certain criteria and certain documents and certain requirements that they had to have the car delivered all the way there. So the cargo provider, the shipping provider in that case, wasn't just doing moving the container from A to B, was actually checking over all the documents that are needed to actually accept the car at the final port of destination. So, and I think with KATA's expertise in e-commerce, I think it's a massive, massive difference maker, because the update that you guys have on the current schemes and the current difference as well. EPR, as we've already mentioned, being one of them.
Yeah, it's absolutely vital. I mean, you're right about the e-commerce situation. E-commerce is not going to go away. As we all know, it's still very much a booming business. However, it has leveled out recently. But the thing we need to focus on here is the transparency. You need to have that flexibility with the freight forwarder and the customs clearance to sit along side by side, because it makes it the education. It's more of an educational pack, which we provide as well. So what we like to do is not only do the end-to-end solution from, export to import, it's also the educational piece in between this, which is vital to any new seller who's looking to expand into Europe or into the UK, or if they wish to expand into US. It's having that understanding that KATA Global Logistics and our customs divisions can work together and provide that educational pack for that seller's journey or customer's journey, expansion. So without that, it can be quite complex. And it can be quite risky, because sometimes, like you said before, you can take the cheaper option, but there could be hidden costs at the final mile delivery. There could be delays in customs. The paperwork could be incorrect. So what we like to do is make sure that when we onboard a new seller or customer, we provide that educational journey all the way through to the final mile.
Amazing. And with what you're saying, especially with the cheaper option, I just want to concentrate on one thing on the cost side of things. I think it's important to understand over the past 2 years since COVID and the coronavirus epidemic and the pandemic itself, I think there was a massive difference. And actually for the US, Trump laws coming in as well from China, I think it's a little, another misconception is thinking that, okay, I shipped 300 units from China to the US for this price. Now I'm sending 600 units 6 months later. You expect it to be either double the price or just a little bit cheaper because, you're shipping more. But actually, it's not as straightforward as that, because shipping fees and shipping costs change day by day. Am I wrong?
No, you're correct. You're correct. They do change day by day. However, what we try and do at KATA is to try and fix those shipping fees on a monthly basis with all the big carrier players. Yeah. So, we try and engage with the carriers on a daily basis. We've got online technology. We can book bookings directly with a carrier, which will give us the latest pricing, which is a plus point for a freight forwarder and for KATA. However, you're touching on the COVID situation there. So pre-COVID, we're getting back to the pre-COVID pricing, and the shipping is becoming more realistic with pricing now. Especially in the COVID times, everyone was buying online, so it increased the buying online, it increased the shipping, and the prices went through the roof. However, what we are seeing, especially out of China and the US, that the pricings are becoming competitive. So what it comes down to now is the transparency, no hidden costs, the educational packs, and this is what we focus on in KATA. It's very easy to select a cheap option. However, you'll pay possibly at the end of that final mile delivery, as I keep saying. I know I keep going over this, but it's a very important for anyone listening to this.
I really do agree, and I think it's just again, I've said this the word misconception so many times, but it is the nature of the industry because it's so highly competitive, right? And every single cargo or shipper or logistics company has their own niche in many ways, but that expertise really does make the difference, especially at that final point. Let's come away finally from the cost side of things, because I think we've made our point then of the expertise. Now, I want to think about the future of this industry. Now, it's something that I've been involved in, and I've written this question for you where, it's an industry that's been there for years and years, right? Even thousands of years, because products have and goods have had to be moved, and this always has to be a movement of things throughout the world, because that's how the world works. Now, I think there is so many things in this industry that cannot change. For example, container sizes. If you now decide to make, let's say, a 100-foot container, you would have to change so many things around the industry. You'd have to change cranes, you would have to change trains, you would have to change lorries, you would have to change so many things. So it's funny to see in a world where innovation is key, especially in business, the sizes of the containers won't change. And that's why some containers you see them stacked in a port. They tend to be really old. They tend to be even overused in many ways and discolored. But that's because they've been all reliables, and it's something that's not going to change. Now, even with the Suez Canal, right, that's where most of the products, especially from the Far East, come into the West. The Suez Canal, apart from the incident that we had a few years back with shipping containers actually being stuck on the Suez Canal trying to turn around, that's almost the only way that we are still going to be able to get those products to come from China. And it's almost hard to believe that's going to change. So my question is, in the current industry, in the industry that you're in and KATA's in, what do you think are the possible changes, not just positive or negative, but actually that can really, really affect the industry?
I mean, we're in contact with, a lot of industry regulators on a regular basis, getting, the updated terms and conditions of what they're trying to do as a business. I mean, especially let's focus on the sea freight for the moment, because that's your biggest, your containers is a big hot topic at the moment. It's driven by increasing global trade and commerce. So there is a need to be more efficient. Comes with cost effective, and we've touched on it before, sustainability. especially around the environment. So I think the future, I mean, there is some big carriers at the moment who are testing the hydrogen fuel option. How that will I see working, I'm a little bit skeptic of it at the moment because they still have the backup engine. So if the hydrogen fails, they still revert back. Will that reduce your costs of shipping? Possibly. At the moment, they're saying it won't. So I don't see an advantage for a freight forwarder or a seller or a customer at this moment having that solution. But however, we've got to go down that route because we have to reduce the carbon footprint. We have to become more sustainable. AI will play a massive part with shipping. So when I mean this, I mean the vessel operation, the tracking, all the paperwork going in electronic, which is going to be happening very shortly, very, super fast. That's going to be becoming more efficient. So I think, from a sea point of view, that there's a lot of things they need to get better at. From air freight, I mean, at the end of the day, it takes 1 or 2 days to get delivered. So yes, you can offset your carbon footprint on your fuel, possibly. Yeah. You can come with all more environmentally friendly, and then if you look at rail, yes, rail's great. You can have electric trains. You can hold more cargo. So there's a lot of pros and cons and all kinds of methods of transportation. But the biggest one and the biggest challenges is all focused on sea freight. So how that will evolve in the coming years will basically determine how the big players will act. If they wish to go down that hydrogen fuel rate and invest millions and get return on investment, that will probably happen, but it's going to take a certain period of time to get there.
Of course, yeah. I mean, those ships are pretty big, and they have to take sustainable amount of weight. So for that technology to come, it will be a life change, of course. But I think for any shipping provider, that's a cost that will take a long time for a return on investment, I guess.
No, absolutely. Of course it will. I mean, the focus, for the shippers and the freight forwarder and the container guys, that what they're looking at is to reduce their carbon footprint. That's the pressure, which they have to find a solution. But obviously, what they need to do also think about is the actual who's shipping this. So if it's more cost effective, they will get more volume. And if it's like you say, if it's part of that educational journey where we mentioned EPR from the point of origin, the sustainable packaging to the recycling, if it can be then shipped across the sea in a sustainable way, yes, that's a plus point. So there is a lot of pluses and a lot of pros against it, but it's going to take a time to settle. Like I say, there's 2 big carriers who are currently in experimental on this, and they are the 2 biggest carriers out there.
Yeah.
They have invested heavily on these new containers, which will run on hydro fuel. So let's see if the others follow. But like I say, it will take a huge amount of investment.
Amazing. Yeah, that's it's very interesting. I think it's highly exciting. As part of being part of the industry, I thought, okay, it's first of all, as we already said, it's an industry that will never die, but it's also an industry that I always thought that has struggles to change, but change happens almost automatically. And I think with what you said about automation, especially, I think that's going to play a huge factor over the coming years. Now, we've done the shipping part, and I think we've added some really, really good stuff, and really coming off the misconception of shipping and logistics in general. I have a final section for our podcast, and it's called Believe It or Not. Now, I know that I've already asked you for a picture of you that was around 10 years ago. Okay, so the section is called Believe It or Not. 10 years ago was the year 2013. It might just show our age, Mark, but I feel like 2013 was about, 2 weeks ago. But unfortunately, it isn't. Now, 10 years ago. You've sent me a picture from apparently your first Greek holiday. It's going to be on screen as well. This is your first Greek experience, apparently. So the question from the section is, obviously, believe it or not, 2013 was 10 years ago. What were you doing in this picture 10 years ago? And if there's one piece of advice you could give yourself that would probably change your life in a way or so, in 2013, what would that be? And that question and that thing that you change your life cannot be investing in crypto, because that would be cheat code. What would that advice be?
I mean, back in 2013, I mean, people are going to look at this picture and say, "Wow, he hasn't changed so much," and I hope so too.
We haven't. We really haven't.
That's very kind.
Like the wine on your table.
I think so. I think that makes sense. If you look what's on the table, there's a load of options on that table. So back in 2013, I think to me there was many options. E-commerce back in 2013 was, on a steady increase.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of key players in that market who were then diverse into the e-commerce world. So if I look back at 2013 and then look how that has progressed, and took a punt, yes, if I had a big load of cash in my pocket, I would invest in some of the big players on the e-commerce market.
Yeah.
So having those 5 drinks on my table at the time of my first experience in Greece was 5 options I could potentially look at.
So are those 5 options just on e-commerce alone, Mark?
No, definitely not. But they were good options. I think I can relate to having those 5 drinks on the table and looking back at 2013 and saying, if I had a big load of cash in my back pocket, where would I invest? Looking 10 years on, e-commerce was just on the verge of booming. Everything was going online. The big players were moving across into the e-commerce world, seeing the opportunities. So I would definitely invest in multiple e-commerce businesses back then if I had that big cash of money in my back pocket. Alternatively, we all talk about social media, that there's a lot of social medias we would like to invest in back in 2013, at the time. But yeah, for me, being involved in e-commerce for certainly a long period of time, there would have been a good opportunity back then.
Yeah, and from your experience in the postal shipping side of things, I think as a customer myself, I've seen myself become increasingly spoiled in the speed I want to receive things, where as a Amazon Prime customer, I tend to just check the Prime options because I'm writing that my impulse buy. That's just the way I am, and and I guess a lot of people are different, but I feel like other people probably feel the same as myself, where I want that impulse buy and I want that delivered as soon as possible. And Prime is amazing because they somehow manage to get from A to B in one day, right?
Yeah.
And I've become increasingly spoiled because I ordered a suit yesterday from another company and they said it's going to take 5 days, and I was generally fuming. But it's just how we've become spoiled and how over the last 10 years, as you said, that postal side of things has changed so much, and it's increasingly more demanding because customers don't just necessarily want to buy more, they want it as soon as possible. And I think a little bit spoiled, but at the same time, it's just how competitive the market is.
No, you're right. It's all about demand and the speed of delivery. So, back in the old days, it was very much about pricing. Then technology came on board, which gives you the options to select, faster parcel options 7 days a week. So you could have an order on a Saturday and you could deliver it Sunday morning, which is incredible for front of e-commerce. Yeah. But everyone is in that game now. Everyone is catching up. There's integrators, there's aggregators in this field. There's various shipping platforms we can talk about, all linked to e-commerce platforms. There's multiple 3PLs involved. So the market is involved hugely based on demand of the public. We could also talk about groceries, online shopping. We could talk about Uber, getting food delivered to your doorstep. All this is going to keep evolving, and it's all driven by demand. So it's just basically demand of the public of being able to order something online. You can order via a laptop or your phone when you're walking down the street. And what people have a tendency to do is also they buy a variation of goods. So if you're buying, say, for fashion, you're going to buy 1 or 2 items because you don't want to go to the shop. You don't want to be parking. You don't want to pay the fees. You just want to get it delivered, try it on, and then return. And that's the options. So, all these carriers are offering this free return solution, or you can drop it off at a certain delivery point now. All those options are available, and it is basically a demand, which is frightening, unless you live somewhere like me in the middle of the sticks.
No, but
and I don't have the luxury of Uber Eats, and I'm glad I don't, because I think I'll be constantly on it. It's hard enough to get a Chinese to deliver to my doorstep. But like I say, it's vital for growth as well, for the economical growth of each country. And that also goes back down to having the final mile. You see guys on electric bikes, you see these electric vehicles everywhere now. It's trying to reduce the carbon footprint, to make it user friendly for people. And so, it's a market, like I say, 2013. If I had that big wad of cash in my pocket, I would have definitely invested in a certain carriers or multiple carriers back then.
Amazing. Hey, Mark, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I thought this episode was all about, I've said it already so many times, it's all about those misconceptions. And I think especially customers, even your customers maybe, believe that the job that, logistics company and shipping companies are doing are easier said than done. So, I think we've covered some misconceptions that really are going to change, I think, the thinking process of some businesses, which is really good. All I have remaining to ask you is, how can anyone interested in what you've said get in contact with you or KATA Global Logistics?
Yeah, you can contact us via our website. There's a really good, super fast inquiry form, which is set up on our website link. You can contact us directly by phone. So, we're here waiting for the phone to ring. Yeah. So by all means, contact us via email as well. So there's multiple points you can contact us. But all I'm saying is, if you wish to be educated in the world of logistics, from the point of export to the point of import, through customs clearances to final mile delivery, options with warehousing, if you wish to have your stock buffered and then delivered at a certain time or direct into FBA, please come and speak to us, because this is what we provide. We provide that educational pack, all the way journey, end-to-end solution, and that's our USP.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening for another episode of the Online Hustle Podcast.
Very good. Thank you, Piero, and thanks for inviting me, and I look forward to the next one.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Online Hustle Podcast. We hope you found the conversation insightful and inspiring. If you'd like to connect with our guests or learn more about their work, you can find their contact details in the episode description below. Stay in the loop with us, following us at the Online Hustle Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. And remember, if you're looking for an expert guidance on e-commerce or have questions for our strategy and growth team, you can reach out to us via our website at strategy.avarsgroup.com or drop us a simple email at strategy@avarsgroup.com. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes where we continue to unravel the strategies that drive online success.